Hi, Stelden here. Spider-Man is coming to PlayStation 5's version of Marvel's Avengers. Brought to you by Square Enix. A lot of company names in there. It's getting pretty pathetic, the amount of self-promotion that kind of goes on with them. I'll tell you what, it is disgusting. It's a slap in the face to anyone who'd pre-ordered this game, and I'll tell you what, the backlash is going to be severe. The only people defending this are people who only own a PlayStation, they plan to buy a PS5 religiously, and they don't give a shit about anyone else, and they don't care about the game industry. They just care about what goes on in their little echo chamber of Sony, Sony, Sony. I'll tell you what as well, Sony are a complete joke. This is a practice that I thought was on the way out, timed exclusivity, whether it's for games, whether it's for DLC. Xbox were doing it shamelessly at the start of the gen. No one liked it, it was a joke, and funny enough, Square Enix were right at the center of it. We had games like Rise of the Tomb Raider, and I can tell you what, that franchise fell off a cliff because of it. Plenty of people, especially in Europe, especially out of North America, they did not own, were not interested in an Xbox One. And Tomb Raider, a sequel to a game that was considered pretty good, not a system seller, just a pretty solid title, is not going to have them flying off the shelves. Microsoft figured it out, and they built up their studio lineup, and now they're trying to get some heavy hitters out there. They're doing the right thing. That is how you build a console, it's how you build a service, and it is how you build goodwill with your customers. That is what Sony's not doing. Sony remind me so much right now of the real shambles that Xbox was in around 2013, 2014. They've rebuilt their brand, they're starting to build goodwill with the PC audience, which is really important to me as primarily a PC player, whereas Sony are just getting miles away. They're becoming an absolute joke and everyone is sick of it, and I think it's partly happening because they're no longer truly confident in their studio's games. At the start of the gen, when they were releasing heavy hitter, we look at the end of the PlayStation where we had the original Last of Us, and then we contrast that to now where they have The Last of Us Part 2, which is at very best a contentious game, plenty of people on the fence. They're the sorts of people who don't like the game. It's more so the religiously buying public who are happy to buy a PlayStation no matter what it is. You could open the disc tray and get a literal pile of shit. They'll be happy, they'll gobble it up, and they'll carry on with whatever else that Sony wants to bring out. They're people who will happily say that The Last of Us Part 2 is fantastic, though the same people will say that this move is incredible. Now they get to play as Spider-Man, they get to jump on Twitter and brag to all of their friends and hate on all of the Xbox and PC community because, oh, you can't play as Spider-Man. So apparently that's a big laugh for them, but the reality is it just means that gamers lose. The most embarrassing thing is, I believe it was the PlayStation YouTube, they also uploaded a Hawkeye trailer. Woohoo, you get to play as Hawkeye in the first post-release DLC. Does anyone really like Hawkeye? It just seems to be, oh cool, he's there as well, great, he's along for the ride. But I don't think anyone would be interested in something exclusively Hawkeye, especially in comparison to Spider-Man. It doesn't make sense. It's like this happened at the last minute because Sony are in panic mode. They know that the PlayStation 5 is not the sure winner that the PlayStation 4 was. They had complete confidence in their team. Now Naughty Dog, shell of their former selves. They might have Ghost of Tsushima, as you can see at the top of the banner, but while it's a good game, it's more something that you kind of have on top of everything else. I don't think it's a real system seller. And the problem that's going on is Xbox, they're creating value. I read earlier today that they've actually removed the Xbox part of the brand, so I should really be saying Microsoft, because they're targeting not just their console, they're also targeting the PC market. They're releasing games on Steam, they're not hiding them away, they're not forcing you to use some shitty store to access them. They're doing a fantastic job, and it looks to be getting even better. Game Pass providing great value. Sony's got nothing to that effect. They're just hoping their exclusives will pull them along. They're no longer are. And now they're relying on exclusivity deals like what's going on with Marvel's Avengers. And what's really stupid to me is they write this article out, which is kind of patronizing in a way because it's all the history of Spider-Man and who he is. I mean, people know who fucking Spider-Man is. You really think people are going to be shelling out $800+, at least in my country, to buy a PlayStation 5 if they don't know who he is? This is meant to be shipping consoles, or they wouldn't be doing it. And it doesn't create value, all it does is create resentment. On PC, we store it with the Epic Store. No one was interested, and you put games in, like the Outer Worlds, behind the Epic Store paywall, I'll say, essentially, because you've got to download it and you've got to give all your info to Tencent. I'd rather pay money, extra money, than do that. And they do that and everyone lost all faith in the Outer Worlds. And the hype went from this is going to be better to Fallout to the Outer Worlds. Is that like the Outer Wilds? I don't know. So people had completely forgotten about it. And the reception to the game, I think it would have been a lot better if they didn't fuck around with all that stuff. It's just stupid. And you think of Nintendo and you might think, well, aren't they doing the same thing? You've got to buy a Nintendo console to play their games. There's a few key differences. For one, they fund just about all of their games. Sony might too. They've done it a lot, but again, they're losing a bit of faith. They're going down this road with so many timed exclusive. It's ridiculous. And when it comes to Nintendo, they're providing a different sort of value now in 2020 because the Nintendo Switch, fantastic piece of hardware. Far, far better than the joke that was the Vita, which had very, very poor software lineup. It just had nothing going for it, even if the tech was decent. But again, it's nothing on the Nintendo Switch, which is, it's incredible. I absolutely love it. And the Nintendo Switch it complements your other devices. So I primarily play on PC, and I've got the Nintendo Switch there to play in bed, or when I want to do something on the couch, I don't have to plug it into the TV, I don't have to stuff around. It's a nice secondary device. The PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 5, they provide absolutely nothing to me, and they don't for anyone else who already owns an Xbox, or they already play games on PC. If I want to play Bloodborne, which is one of my favourite games of the gen, I have to plug in the PS4. It's a pain in the ass. I've got to play an inferior version when we think of Dark Souls 3 Sekiro, because I've got to play Bloodborne at 30 FPS. And it's holding the game hostage. There's so many people, so many fans, if they released Bloodborne on PC, would be all over it. We've got Horizon Zero Dawn coming out over the weekend, I believe, and I'm going to play it on Steam. I'm going to grab it day one. Could I buy it now and play it on the PS4? Sure, but I just don't give a shit. I don't want to get out the PS4 to play something and have an inferior experience than I normally do on PC. It's just a practice that needs to go. Microsoft have seen it. That's why they're providing value in other areas like handheld. They know the road this is going down. And Sony, it feels like they're holding onto the edge of a cliff and they don't want to fall off because all of their other product lineups, everything else that Sony touch turns to shit. It's rubbish. All they've got is the PlayStation. So they're holding on to all dear life, and it's just a shame that gamers are going to have to pay the brunt of it. I'm pretty worried about them this gen, I've got to say. I think they were kind of paving the way 5 or 6 years ago, where their exclusives weren't having microtransactions in them. They were providing good, solid games. Now, post-Witcher 3, I'd say we're more in an era where there's a bit less of that, and the publishers are starting to have to crawl back a bit. And it's making Sony look outdated because they've had nothing to follow up on. If they think continuing to get into bed with Square Enix is going to help them, I think they're in for a reality check, because Square Enix are about as pathetic as they are at the moment. They've got nothing going for them. I don't want to pick on Marvel's Avengers. It looks like the sort of game I'd normally look at and say, yep, let's tear this game to shreds because it's just a movie, comic tie-in. It's going to have nothing innovative, but I think games like that are fine to an extent. When we go back to the PS2 era, maybe even early PS3, we had a lot of movie tie-in games and things to that effect, which were just a bit of fun. They weren't super serious, they were probably developed in a year or so. They're kind of similar like the Lego games to me. Never anything truly special or unique, but you can have a bit of fun with them with characters you like. And Marvel's Avengers looks okay for that side of things. It looks better than I thought it was going to be when I think it was originally kind of announced as a live service, and they've gone back a bit. I think it's more of a co-op kind of experience, and they might be more in line with like a Nintendo title on Switch, where they add a bit of content over time to keep it relevant, but it's not going to be like a full-on Ubisoft style The Division or something like that. I'd say that's a positive, that's okay. My worry with this game though, and what's going to keep it from being a blockbuster of any kind, is instead of playing as Spider-Man, for example, as the main character, or playing as Thor, or playing as Captain America, you got to play as her, Kamala Khan. Now, I can say before I heard about this game and I looked into it, I had no idea who this person was. Apparently, she's been in comics, and she's an absolute legend of comics because she's been in them since... Let's have a look. Let's have a look now. I'm going to scroll down. She's had so much history. 2013. So when you think of these characters, so much history, so much going for them, they've built fandoms for decades and decades. Instead of using that resource, and we know we've got all these heroes in the game, so it's not like they couldn't get the license or something, they're there, but instead you've got to play as Carmella. And I don't think anyone's interested who's not trying to push some sort of political angle and they're desperate to like the decision. I just can't see anyone who would be remotely interested, and I think a lot of casual fans who get into the game thinking, awesome, I get to play as, is Robert Downey Jr. voicing Iron Man? Certainly not, but that's going to be the fan casual expectation. When they get Carmella, they're going to be even more pissed off. It's ridiculous. I don't understand how someone could make that decision and think that's gonna kind of gel with people and get them excited, because they're gonna play the game for 20 minutes and go, right, can I play as fucking Thor yet? I don't know what the starting scenario is like. Maybe it's gonna be a bit better than that. I haven't completely spoiled it for myself, but I know it's mainly around Carmella, and I think people are gonna be pretty shitty. I do have a bit of a bone to pick with this game though, as while it's not the end of the world, it really pains me that Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Montreal, I believe it was, that they've been pulled from other series, because they were the ones who used to make Deus Ex. They were making Tomb Raider. Now they're making this kind of fun, lovable game that's pretty much just a way for Sony to sell consoles at this point when they're making decisions like this. I mean, if we were getting the Avengers on top of those other series, I really wouldn't care, but Square Enix, they've just been looking short-term for so long. They've killed Deus Ex. I would be very surprised if we get another game in that series that's not ruined to some extent. It's not like a mobile game, not some sort of live service. I don't think we're just going to get a traditional, awesome kind of immersive sim experience from Deus Ex anymore. Tomb Raider, as I said, the hype was killed because of that Microsoft deal. People didn't really get into the sequel too much because the hype's just not there. When you do a timed exclusive and you got to wait a year, people just forget about it. Look at what happened with the Outer Worlds, as I mentioned. So then you've got the Hitman series as well, and the developers there, they scared them away. They ended up making some sort of deal and took the series with them. We got Hitman 3 coming. I'm sure it's going to be pretty damn awesome. It's probably the most down-to-earth kind of stealth game that we've got left. They killed so many. Look what they did with Thief 5 or 6 years ago. That series was completely dead in the water because of that game. And again, Square Enix at the helm. So to me, Square Enix have got absolutely no integrity left. They're just milking series that have been going for 20 years and slowly digging a bit of a hole. I know we had Dragon Quest, but I think that's kind of the Enix side of it, and they've been doing their own thing for quite a long time and doing it really competently. And I don't think that'll change, they'll carry on, but the Square side of things, which I would be guessing is the bigger part of it because they've got far more series, they're just become a complete joke. I look at their upcoming list of games expecting to see a whole bunch like you would with Ubisoft or EA or even Activision. But I don't see much at all. After Marvel Avengers, we get Dying Light 2, which has nothing to do with them. Techland developed. I'm sure that Square Enix just managed to worm their way into a publishing deal with them. Then you got Outriders. Had a look into this game and it just looks like a generic live service that is going nowhere. It's meant to compete with The Division. It's meant to compete with Destiny. Good fucking luck. Brand new IP, no one's interested, and Square are going to just milk it to the bone. They've had no good ideas for a long time. Just look at Final Fantasy, which tries to copy a whole bunch of trends, loses its identity, ends up just being a shell of its former self. You look at Kingdom Hearts, which heavily relies on Disney characters, has no originality of its own, and I think people have looked at Kingdom Hearts 3 as a way to say goodbye, and I don't think the hype's going to be there for a 4. Then we've got Circuit Superstars. I don't think that's going to be a heavy hitter. Then we've got Balan Wonderworld. That looks fun. I'm going to buy that day one. That looks really good, and I think that's destroyed my point, which is not a good thing. So we're going to close the webpage here, and we're going to crack on. But it's just a fact they really don't have much beyond some smaller titles. There's no heavy hitters that are in the pipeline. Maybe there's Final Fantasy 16 next year. And there's a pretty highly credible rumor going around that it's going to have more tie-ins with Sony. So, more exclusivity. I'm sure they're going to do their delayed PC release, which is fairly pathetic. It's what Rockstar also did with Red Dead Redemption 2. It just creates more and more resentment. Gets PC gamers thinking, right, there's just no reason to buy things day one like that. And when it eventually comes out, you just say, I'll just forget it. And you lose a lot of your love for series like that because you start to move on. You find other things and you realize you weren't actually missing all that much. So Square Enix, they need to really just double down on what was originally working for them, where they were making some games with integrity, like Deus Ex. Then we had Crystal Dynamics with Tomb Raider. Get them back on a similar series. Make a new IP or something. Just do something a little bit more interesting than only tie-in games and trying to bring back Final Fantasy VII. Trying to make a 16th entry in a series that's been going for so long that people are pretty much sick of it. Final Fantasy isn't what it once was. And look, the MMO looks pretty awesome, but the single-player series is lacking identity. And unless they're going to reboot it properly, make it something awesome, I can't see it ever coming back into the true mainstream. So they really need some new IPs, and they need some actual creativity going around. When it comes to Sony, you really need to just change what you're doing with your exclusive teams. Don't let Naughty Dog just do their own thing and destroy franchises. Obviously, we've seen that Sucker Punch can make a great game when it comes to Ghost of Tsushima, so they should earn a kind of a rung up to do a bit more, and hopefully they can create something better for the PlayStation 5. So, Sony, stop outdated tactics that were proven to not work 5 or 6 years ago. You're going to really just put off people on the fence who might buy a PlayStation 5 as a second console, because they're not going to bother. They're going to play the patient game and wait for the games to eventually come to PC many years later, because sometimes you just learn you're not missing out much by waiting. And it's simply not a good thing to do. It's not the right thing to do, and it's not going to help gaming. So thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you again. Thanks very much. Bye for now.